As the cold wind howled outside the grand mansion, the daughter of billionaire William Hart sat quietly in her room, staring out the window. She had not spoken in over a year, and her silence weighed heavily in the heart of her father. No one knew why she had stopped talking, not even the doctors, but the more time passed, the more it became clear there was no simple explanation. Her father, wealthy beyond measure, could buy anything, but he could not buy the answer to his daughter's silence. The walls of their estate were adorned with wealth, yet the emptiness inside seemed to echo louder than the grand chandeliers that hung from the ceiling. It was in this silence that Maria, the maid, entered one evening with a strange vial in her hand. She had been with the family for years, always unseen yet ever present, and today, something in her eyes seemed different, almost hopeful. "I have something for her," Maria whispered to herself, carefully placing the vial on the bedside table. The liquid inside glimmered with an unusual light, something that felt both mysterious and comforting. The billionaire, still troubled by his daughter's condition, had no faith left in medicine or therapists, but Maria had always been a constant source of comfort in his home. He trusted her more than anyone, even though he couldn't understand why she had brought the vial. With a quiet sigh, she turned to the girl who had been lost in her own world. "I know you're in there," Maria said softly. The girl's eyes flickered for a moment, but she didn't respond. Maria had no intention of forcing her. Instead, she sat down beside her and spoke with the calm of someone who knew the secret to patience. "This will help you," she whispered, opening the vial. "Just trust me." As she placed a single drop of the strange liquid on the girl's tongue, the room seemed to pause. The stillness lingered for what felt like an eternity. Then, as if by some miracle, the girl's lips parted for the first time in over a year. Her voice was shaky at first, but the words came, "Thank you." A rush of disbelief swept through Maria, followed by a sense of triumph. She had done it. The impossible had been achieved. The girl, who had been mute for so long, had spoken. Maria stood there, frozen for a moment, as the realization set in. What had just happened was more than a simple conversation. It was the beginning of a change that neither she nor the billionaire could have ever predicted. The next morning, the mansion was unusually quiet. William Hart, still grappling with the shock of his daughter's sudden words the night before, sat in his office, staring at the papers before him. He tried to focus on the business deals, the empire he had built, but his mind kept drifting back to that moment his daughter had spoken, and for the first time in over a year, he could hear her voice. It was soft, almost fragile, but it was unmistakably her. "Thank you." The words echoed in his head. He didn't know what to make of it. Could it be real, or was it just a fleeting moment? Maria, the maid, had always been quiet, never asking for attention, but her presence was different now. She had unlocked something in his daughter. But how? What had she done? He needed answers. As he sat there, lost in his thoughts, the door creaked open. Maria stepped inside, her usual calm demeanor hiding something deeper, something William couldn't place. "Isabella is awake," Maria said softly, her voice steady but with a hint of urgency. William stood up quickly. His daughter, Isabella, had been unresponsive for so long that hearing her name in the present tense felt surreal. "She spoke?" he asked, his voice betraying the confusion he felt. Maria nodded, her eyes holding a glimmer of something, hope, perhaps, but also a sense of responsibility. "She did," Maria replied, "and I believe there is more to this. You need to hear it from her." William's heart pounded in his chest as he followed Maria upstairs to Isabella's room. The house, which had once been filled with the sound of laughter, now seemed eerily silent, as if holding its breath. They reached her door, and Maria paused. "She's waiting for you," she said. William hesitated for a moment, then entered. Isabella was sitting up in bed, her back propped up by pillows. She looked up when he walked in, her eyes wide and filled with uncertainty. She hadn't spoken in so long that William almost didn't know what to expect. But then, to his surprise, she smiled faintly. "Dad," she whispered, her voice soft and fragile, but undeniably her own. William's breath caught in his throat. "Isabella," he whispered back, his voice trembling. It had been so long since he had heard her speak. The words felt foreign, as though they belonged to someone else. "I didn't mean to worry you," she said quietly, looking down at her hands. I didn't know how to say it. William stepped closer, his eyes searching her face. Say what, sweetheart? He asked gently. Isabella hesitated, then looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and relief. I'm sorry. I was afraid. I couldn't speak because I didn't want to disappoint you. I thought if I stayed quiet, you'd be happier. William's heart ached as he listened to her. For so long, he had believed her silence was a mystery, something beyond his understanding. But now, hearing her speak, he realized how much more was going on inside her. Isabella, you could never disappoint me, he said softly, sitting down beside her. You don't have to be afraid. Isabella wiped her eyes, her voice trembling as she continued. I was scared, Dad, scared of everything. I didn't know how to face the world. And then Maria came. She gave me something. William turned to Maria, his eyes filled with questions. What did you give her? He asked. Maria stepped forward, holding up the vial that had changed everything. It's just a drop, she explained, a special mixture that helps unlock the voice inside. Isabella's silence was not just a physical condition. It was her way of hiding from the world. She paused, glancing at Isabella. This helped her find her voice again. William looked at the vial, his mind racing. A mixture? He repeated, incredulity in his voice. Maria nodded, her expression serious. Yes, it's a combination of natural ingredients, things I've learned over the years. But it's not just about the liquid. It's about the healing, the trust that comes with it. William stood up, his mind racing with the implications of what Maria had said. He had always been a man of logic, of reason. But now, in this moment, his world was being turned upside down. His daughter, who had been silent for so long, was speaking, and it was because of Maria, this woman who had been quietly working in the background of his life, now revealed as the one who had unlocked the miracle. Thank you, he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. Maria nodded, but her eyes seemed to carry a deeper understanding. There is more to this, William. She needs to heal, but this is just the beginning. William nodded slowly, his heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and fear. He wasn't sure where this would lead, but he knew one thing for sure: his daughter's voice was back, and with it came the promise of a future he had almost given up on. As the days passed, the mansion that had once felt so empty now buzzed with a newfound energy. Isabella's voice was no longer a distant memory but a living, breathing presence in the house. William Hart, the billionaire who had long struggled with his daughter's silence, now found himself listening to her words with both awe and concern. The soft whispers she had once uttered had grown into full conversations, and yet something still lingered in the air, an unspoken tension, a question that had yet to be answered. Maria, the maid who had brought the strange vial, remained a quiet figure in the background, but her presence was more crucial than ever. Every morning, she arrived early to make sure Isabella's progress continued. It was not just the liquid that had helped the girl speak, it was the trust and care Maria had shown her. The more they spoke, the more Isabella seemed to open up, yet there was still something she had not shared. It wasn't just her voice that had returned. It was a part of her spirit that had been locked away, and William could see that his daughter was struggling with how to live outside the walls of her silence. You've been doing so well, Isabella, William said one evening, as they sat together in the grand living room. Isabella was fiddling with a small trinket on the table, her mind clearly elsewhere. She looked up, her eyes filled with an emotion William had never seen before: fear. Dad, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I'm afraid. I don't know how to be normal. The words hit him harder than he expected. He had always believed that once she could speak again, everything would return to the way it was. But now, hearing her speak of fear, he understood that silence wasn't the only thing she had been hiding. It was as though she had been living in a bubble, separated from the world, and now that she could finally connect with it, she didn't know how. Isabella, you are normal, he said, his voice soft but firm. You're more than normal, you're amazing. But his words didn't seem to ease her. She looked down, playing with the edges of her sleeve, unsure of herself. What if I can't fit in? What if people don't accept me? She asked. William's heart ached. His daughter had spent so long in silence, isolated from the world, and now she feared the very thing she had yearned for: connection. You don't have to fit in, sweetheart. You just have to be yourself, and I will help you with that. You'll see." Isabella looked up at her father, her eyes filled with doubt, but something in his words seemed to give her a glimmer of hope. Yet, despite the reassurance, William couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was at play. He turned to Maria, who had been standing quietly by the door, watching the exchange with a knowing look. "Maria, what's really going on?" She speaks. "But there's more to this, isn't there?" Maria nodded slowly. "There is," she replied. Isabella's silence wasn't just because she couldn't speak. It was a way of protecting herself. She's been hiding from something, from her own fears. William looked at his daughter, his heart heavy with understanding. "What do we do now?" he asked. Maria stepped forward, her gaze steady. "We help her face those fears, but it won't be easy. She has to learn to trust again, to believe that she deserves to be heard." William nodded, a sense of resolve settling over him. He would not let his daughter be trapped in her fear. As the days went on, Isabella's progress continued, but Maria's words echoed in William's mind. His daughter had not just been mute, she had been emotionally paralyzed, unable to face the world around her. The next morning, as William sat down to breakfast with Isabella, he noticed a change in her demeanor. She seemed quieter than usual, almost withdrawn. "Isabella, what's on your mind?" he asked gently, trying to draw her out. She hesitated, then spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared, Dad. I don't know how to trust anyone." The words were like a punch to the gut. William realized that his daughter's journey had only just begun. The miracle of her voice returning was just the first step. Now, they had to find a way to heal the deeper wounds, the ones that had kept her silent for so long. "Isabella, it's okay to be scared," he said softly, "but you're not alone. We will do this together." Isabella looked up at him, her eyes searching his face for the truth of his words. For the first time in a long time, she seemed to believe him. The road ahead would be difficult, but they were no longer facing it in silence. Together, they would confront her fears, one step at a time. As the days went by, Isabella began to slowly open up, but there was still a deep sense of fear that clung to her. William Hart could see the walls she had built around herself, trying to protect her heart from the world. Despite her progress in speaking again, there was something missing, a piece of her that had not yet fully healed. Maria, the maid, continued to be a steady presence in their lives, always with a quiet word of encouragement, but she never pushed too hard. Instead, she allowed Isabella the time she needed, trusting the process. But she knew that this healing journey required more than just words. One evening, after a long day of Isabella sitting in her room, William sat in the living room, staring out the window at the sprawling estate. The silence was comforting but also heavy. The mansion, which once felt full of life and joy, now felt like a place where everyone was hiding from something. Isabella's silence had always been the elephant in the room, and now that it had been broken, the space between them still felt vast. It wasn't just the lack of speech, it was the lack of connection, of real trust. William had failed to understand for so long what his daughter had been going through. He had been so focused on fixing her, on making her talk again, that he had neglected the emotional scars that went far deeper. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Maria entering the room. She looked at him for a moment before speaking. "She's struggling, William. She's not just afraid of speaking. She's afraid of being seen." William frowned, trying to understand. "What do you mean?" Maria sat down, her expression serious. Isabella's silence wasn't just a choice. It was a shield. She didn't want to be noticed, to be vulnerable. And now that she's talking again, she's facing the fear of being seen for who she really is. She doesn't know if she can trust the world outside of this house. William's heart sank as he listened to Maria's words. It hit him like a wave, the realization that Isabella's fear wasn't just about being heard, it was about being known. He had been so focused on getting her to speak again, but he hadn't considered the deeper reasons behind her silence. He had missed the emotional toll it had taken on her. "How do we help her?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Maria looked at him, her eyes filled with wisdom. "She needs to feel safe. She needs to feel like she can trust that the world won't hurt her, that she won't be judged." William nodded slowly, absorbing what Maria was saying. He had never truly understood how much Isabella had suffered. She hadn't just been mute. She had been locked in a world of fear, unable to express herself because of the pain she had experienced. The silence wasn't a sign of rebellion or defiance, it was a desperate attempt to protect herself from the world that had failed her. The next day, William decided to take a different approach. He knew it was time to stop trying to fix things and start helping Isabella heal from the inside out. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing: he had to be there for her in a way he had never been before. He couldn't just be the father who pushed for results. He had to be the father who listened, who truly saw her for who she was. He went up to Isabella's room, knocking softly on the door. "Isabella?" he called out gently. There was a brief pause before he heard her voice from inside. "Yes, Dad?" It was still soft, still uncertain, but it was her voice. He opened the door slowly, stepping inside. Isabella was sitting on her bed, looking down at her hands, her expression distant. He sat down beside her, careful not to crowd her. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice calm and warm. She nodded, still not looking at him. He reached out and placed a hand on hers, offering a simple gesture of support. "I know you've been through a lot," he began. "And I know it's hard to trust people, even me." Isabella finally looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and uncertainty. "I don't know how to trust again," she whispered. "I'm scared of being hurt." William's heart broke at the sound of her voice, at the vulnerability she was finally allowing herself to show. "I understand," he said softly. "I've failed you in many ways. I've pushed you too hard, tried to make things right without fully understanding what you needed, but I want to change that." Isabella's eyes softened, and she squeezed his hand gently. "I want to try," she said quietly. "I want to trust, but I'm scared." William nodded, understanding her fear. "We'll take it one step at a time, sweetheart. There's no rush. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here when you're ready." For the first time in a long while, Isabella smiled, a small, hesitant smile, but a smile nonetheless. It wasn't the smile of a girl who had all the answers, but it was the smile of someone who was beginning to believe again. And for William, that was enough. It was the first step toward healing. As he left her room, he felt a sense of hope rise within him. The journey wouldn't be easy, but they were no longer facing it alone. Together, they would find their way, one step at a time. As the days passed, Isabella's journey toward healing continued at a slow but steady pace. She had begun to open up more to her father, William Hart, but the scars of her past were still deeply ingrained. Every conversation with him seemed like a step forward, but there were moments when she would withdraw into herself, afraid of being hurt again. William understood that this was not going to be an easy road, but he was determined to walk it with her, no matter how long it took. Maria, the maid, remained a steady presence in their lives, offering advice and guidance whenever needed, but William knew that he had to take charge of his daughter's emotional healing. One morning, he decided that it was time for a change. He realized that he had to stop shielding Isabella from the world, and instead, he needed to show her that it could be a place of safety and love. He couldn't keep her locked away in the mansion forever. She needed to see that she was capable of more than just surviving. They had to take a step into the world beyond their gates. William had an idea. He wanted to take Isabella out into the city, to show her that life, despite its challenges, could still offer her something beautiful. The thought of taking her outside made him nervous, but he knew it was a necessary step. Isabella had spent too much time hiding, and now it was time for her to rediscover the world. He approached her that morning, as she sat by the window, gazing out at the sunlit garden. "Isabella," he said gently, "how would you feel about going outside today? Maybe we could take a walk in the park, see the city a little. You can choose what we do." Isabella turned to him, her eyes uncertain. "Outside?" she whispered, as if the word itself was unfamiliar. "Yes," William nodded. "I know it's scary, but it's just the world, and you don't have to face it alone. I'll be with you." Isabella looked down at her hands, fiddling nervously with her sleeves. She had spent so much time in silence, so much time behind the walls of the mansion, that the thought of stepping outside felt overwhelming. "I'm not sure, Dad," she said softly. "What if I'm not ready? What if people don't understand?" William sat down next to her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to be ready right now," he said. "We can take it slow. You'll decide when you're ready." but I want you to know that it's okay to be scared. It's okay to take small steps." Isabella hesitated, but then a small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. Maybe I can try," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of fear and hope. William smiled back, his heart swelling with pride. "That's all I ask." They spent the morning preparing. Isabella, still unsure, dressed in a simple outfit, her eyes occasionally darting toward the door, as if the outside world were something unknown and intimidating. William could sense her apprehension, but he didn't push her. He simply let her take the lead. When they finally stepped outside, the sun felt warm against her skin, and the fresh air was almost overwhelming after being inside for so long. They walked slowly down the path toward the park, with William beside her every step of the way. The city was alive with the usual hustle and bustle, but Isabella kept her focus on the ground, too afraid to look up. "It's okay, sweetheart," William reassured her. "You're doing great." They reached the park, and William noticed that Isabella was starting to relax just a little. She took a small breath, then looked up at the trees, their leaves gently swaying in the breeze. There were people around them, families, children playing, couples walking hand in hand, but none of it seemed to faze her. For a moment, she simply stood there, taking it all in. William stood quietly beside her, giving her the space she needed. He knew this was just the beginning. Isabella's first steps into the world would not be easy, but they were steps nonetheless. Slowly, she began to walk, her feet shuffling slightly at first, but as they continued, she started to walk more confidently. Her head held a little higher. They found a bench near the fountain, and William sat down, watching Isabella as she slowly began to take in the sights around her. There was a subtle change in her. She was beginning to let go of the fear that had been holding her back. As they sat there together, William realized that this was the most important part of Isabella's journey. Not just the return of her voice, but her reclaiming of her life, piece by piece. "I never thought I could do this," Isabella said quietly, her voice filled with wonder. "But it feels different. It feels like maybe I can." William smiled, his heart full of emotion. "You can, sweetheart. You always could." The rest of the day passed in a blur of new experiences. Isabella was still hesitant, still cautious, but she was also curious, and for the first time in a long while, she seemed to be enjoying herself. They walked through the park, visited a cafe, and even had ice cream, a small, simple pleasure, but one that felt monumental for Isabella. As they returned to the mansion that evening, William felt a sense of hope he hadn't experienced in years. His daughter was finally taking steps toward healing, and he was right there beside her, ready to support her every step of the way. It wasn't the end of her journey, but it was a significant beginning. Isabella had stepped into the world again, and with her father by her side, there was no telling what she could accomplish next. After their walk in the park, things began to shift between Isabella and her father, William. The walls that had been so firmly constructed around her heart, built from years of isolation and fear, began to crack. It wasn't that the fear was gone. It was still there, lingering in the corners of her mind. But now there was something else: hope. William watched his daughter more closely now, seeing how she interacted with the world, and he began to notice the small victories that might have gone unnoticed before. Isabella was learning to speak again, but more than that, she was learning to trust again. Yet, William couldn't ignore the fact that there was still something deeply rooted in her heart, an emotional wound that hadn't yet healed. He knew they had made progress, but there was more to do. One evening, as they sat down to dinner, Isabella looked up at her father with a rare, hesitant smile. "Dad, can we go back to the park tomorrow?" she asked. William blinked in surprise. "Of course, sweetheart," he said, his voice warm. "We can go wherever you want." Isabella's smile grew a little wider. "I want to keep walking," she said softly. It felt nice. William's heart swelled with pride. This was the breakthrough he had been hoping for, the first sign that Isabella was starting to find joy in the simple things again. She wasn't just walking through the world, she was engaging with it, embracing it, step by step. The next day, they returned to the park. This time, Isabella was more confident. She walked without hesitating, looking around at the world with wide, curious eyes. William walked beside her, his heart full of hope. He hadn't expected this progress to come so quickly. but he wasn't about to question it. Isabella had faced so much, and now, for the first time in a long while, she was taking charge of her own healing. They spent the entire afternoon in the park, walking, talking, and even sitting on the grass to watch the clouds. Isabella spoke more freely now, her words coming with ease, as though they were no longer a burden to her. When they finally left the park, William felt a profound sense of relief. This wasn't just about her speaking again. This was about her finding her place in the world, reclaiming a piece of herself that she had buried for so long. The next week, Isabella took another big step. She asked if she could go to school. It was a small request, but it shook William to his core. He knew this would be the real test, the moment that would either make or break her progress. The thought of sending her into the world, where people would stare and judge, made him uneasy. He had protected her for so long, kept her inside the safety of their home, but he knew that this was the next step for her. She needed to face the world, just as she had faced her fears in the park. "Are you sure you're ready?" William asked her one evening as they sat together. Isabella nodded, though there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "I think so," she said. "I want to try." William reached for her hand, his heart heavy with emotion. "We can go together. I'll be right there with you every step of the way." The next morning, they arrived at the school. William parked the car, and they both sat in silence for a moment. The school loomed in front of them, full of children running and laughing, but to Isabella, it might as well have been a mountain. William knew this was a huge step for her, but he also knew that she was capable of more than she thought. They walked through the gates together, and for the first time, William noticed that Isabella wasn't holding his hand as tightly. She had taken a step back, finding her own way, and it was a small but significant victory. As they walked through the halls of the school, Isabella seemed to shrink into herself, unsure of how she was being perceived. William could see the nervousness in her eyes, but he also saw the determination. He could sense that she was ready to face this challenge, even if it scared her. She was willing to try. They reached the classroom, and Isabella stopped, her hand gripping the doorframe. She turned to William, her eyes wide. "Dad, I'm scared," she whispered. William knelt down beside her, his voice steady and reassuring. "It's okay to be scared," he said. "But remember, you're not alone. You have me, and you have yourself. You're stronger than you know." Isabella took a deep breath and nodded. She pushed the door open, stepping into the room, and William stayed close behind her, though he didn't walk in. He watched as Isabella found her seat and sat down, her hands resting on the desk in front of her. It was a small, quiet moment, but it felt like the biggest step she had taken in years. As he turned to leave, he felt a rush of pride. His daughter was no longer afraid of the world. She was walking through it, one step at a time. That evening, when Isabella returned home, she was quieter than usual, but there was a sense of peace in her that hadn't been there before. She had faced the world, and she had come back stronger. "How was school?" William asked, his voice gentle. Isabella looked up at him, her eyes tired but content. "It wasn't as bad as I thought," she said. "I think I can do it," William smiled, feeling a sense of joy that words could not describe. His daughter was healing, and he was seeing her in a way he hadn't in so long. She was no longer just surviving, she was living again. After Isabella's first day at school, things began to shift once more. She had proven to herself that she could face the world, but the process of healing was far from complete. She walked into the house that evening, a quiet confidence in her step, but there was still an unmistakable tension behind her eyes. She had done it. She had walked into the school, sat down in class, and faced her fear. But that night, as she lay in bed, the weight of the day pressed heavily on her chest. The world outside had been kinder than she expected, but it had also been overwhelming. The noise, the people, the unspoken judgments, though she had faced them, they had not been easy to bear. William Hart, her father, watched her closely. He noticed the small shifts in her behavior, the moments when she smiled with genuine joy and the times when her shoulders would slump with quiet exhaustion. He had been by her side every step of the way, but he knew that there was still more. She needed more than just his presence. She needed to heal fully, and for that, he knew they needed to go deeper. One evening, as they sat together, William gently broached the subject that had been on his mind. Isabella, how do you feel about what's been happening? About school? About everything? Isabella looked up at him, her expression guarded but soft. I think it's better, she said slowly. I'm not as afraid anymore. William nodded, his heart swelling with pride. That's amazing. You've come so far. Isabella smiled faintly, but then her smile faded. But sometimes, I still feel like I don't belong, like I'm different from everyone else. Her voice wavered, and William could hear the uncertainty in her words. It was a familiar feeling, one that had followed her for so long, even before her silence had taken hold. The fear of being different, of not fitting in, had been a part of her long before she had learned to stay quiet. William's heart ached as he listened to her. He had done everything he could to support her, but he realized that the road ahead would require more than just encouragement. It would require acceptance. He needed to help her accept herself, just as she was. Isabella, he said gently, you are not like everyone else, and that's what makes you so special. You don't have to fit in, sweetheart. You just have to be you. Isabella's eyes flickered as she absorbed his words. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, slowly, she spoke again. I don't want to feel this way anymore. I want to feel like I can belong. William leaned forward, his voice warm but firm. You already belong, Isabella. Right here with me. And no matter what, you always will. You are enough, just as you are. Isabella stared at her father for a long moment, her eyes searching his face for the truth in his words. Finally, she nodded, though her expression was still uncertain. I'll try, she said quietly. I'll try to believe you. Over the next few days, Isabella continued to go to school. There were good days and bad days when she walked into class with her head held high, and other days when she struggled to find the courage to step inside. But William was always there, waiting for her when she came home. He made sure she knew that no matter how hard it was, she was never alone. One afternoon, as they were sitting together in the living room, Isabella turned to her father with a serious expression on her face. Dad, I want to talk about something, she said. William turned to her, his heart lifting at the sound of her voice. What's on your mind? Isabella took a deep breath, clearly struggling with her words. I've been thinking about what you said, about being enough, about being myself. She hesitated, then looked up at him. I don't know if I believe it yet, but I want to try. I want to learn how to be okay with who I am. William's heart swelled with emotion as he listened to her. That's all I want, sweetheart. To see you happy and at peace with yourself. Isabella smiled, her eyes brightening for the first time in a long while. I think I can do that. I want to do that. In the following weeks, Isabella continued to make progress. The road wasn't always smooth, and there were still moments of doubt and fear, but she was learning to face them. With every small victory, she grew stronger, more confident, and with each step forward, she began to realize that she didn't have to fit into anyone else's mold to be valuable. Her worth came from within, from the strength she had shown in finding her voice again. One afternoon, as they sat in the garden, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Isabella looked at her father and said, Dad, I feel like I'm starting to see the world differently. It doesn't seem so scary anymore. William smiled, his eyes full of pride. That's because you're seeing it through your own eyes, not through the fear that held you back. Isabella nodded, her smile widening. I think I'm starting to understand what that means. I'm ready to keep going, to keep trying. William reached out and took her hand, his voice full of love. And I'll be right here, every step of the way. For the first time in a long while, Isabella truly believed him. The journey was far from over, but she was no longer afraid of the path ahead. Together, they would walk it, one step at a time. As the weeks passed, Isabella's confidence continued to grow. She had become more comfortable in school, more willing to engage with others, and her bond with her father, William, was stronger than ever. Despite the progress, there were still moments when the weight of her past experiences threatened to pull her back into the shadows. But with each step forward, she became more determined to embrace who she was and the world around her. One afternoon, after school, Isabella sat on the couch, a sketchbook in her lap. William was in his study, but he knew that Isabella had become more interested in drawing lately, something she hadn't done in years. It was a small but meaningful change. He could tell that the act of expressing herself on paper allowed her to process emotions that she couldn't put into words. He watched her quietly from the doorway, admiring how far she had come. She was so much more than the girl who had once sat in silence, hiding from the world. A soft knock on the door broke his thoughts, and he turned to see Maria entering the room. Maria had been a constant source of support for both him and Isabella. "How is she doing?" Maria asked quietly, glancing toward Isabella. William smiled, a proud but gentle smile. "She's doing well," he said. "She's been drawing again. It's something I didn't expect, but I think it's helping her." Maria nodded. "Art has always been a powerful way to express the things we can't say. I'm glad she's finding a way to communicate, even if it's not with words." William walked over to the couch where Isabella was sitting. She looked up at him as he sat beside her. "What are you drawing?" he asked softly. Isabella hesitated, then showed him the page. It was a simple sketch of a tree, but there was something beautiful about it, the way the branches stretched out, reaching for the sky. It was a symbol of growth and strength. "It's beautiful," William said, his voice thick with emotion. "Is it how you're feeling?" Isabella nodded slowly. "I think so," she whispered. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, about how far I've come, and about where I want to go." William placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice filled with love. "You've come so far, Isabella. I'm so proud of you." Isabella looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. "But sometimes I'm still scared," she said quietly. "I know I've made progress, but it feels like there's still so much I don't understand. I don't know if I'll ever truly fit in." William smiled warmly, his voice reassuring. "You don't have to fit in, sweetheart. You just have to be yourself. And I promise you, there is a place for you in this world. You don't have to have all the answers. You're doing just fine." Isabella looked down at her sketchbook, her fingers tracing the lines of the tree. "I want to be okay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to be able to live without fear." William gently lifted her chin so that their eyes met. "You are okay," he said firmly, "and you will be, one step at a time. There's no rush, no deadline. Just take each day as it comes." Isabella nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. For the first time, she truly believed him. She wasn't the same girl who had once feared the world. She was stronger now, more willing to embrace the challenges ahead. That evening, as they sat down for dinner, the conversation turned toward the future. "What do you want to do next?" William asked, genuinely curious. Isabella thought for a moment, then looked at him with determination in her eyes. "I want to try new things. I want to meet more people. I want to keep growing." William's heart swelled with pride. "That's the spirit, sweetheart. I'll be here for you, every step of the way." The days that followed were filled with small adventures and victories for Isabella. She joined a local art class, something she had never considered before. She began to make friends, and while it wasn't always easy, she was learning to trust people again. With each passing day, her world grew a little bigger, and her fear grew a little smaller. One afternoon, while walking home from school, Isabella saw a group of kids sitting in the park, laughing and chatting. They waved at her as she passed, and for the first time, she didn't feel out of place. She smiled and waved back, her heart light. She wasn't just walking through the world anymore, she was becoming a part of it. Later that evening, as she sat with William in the living room, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. "Dad, I think I'm finally starting to understand what you meant," she said, her voice soft but steady. "About being myself, about not having to fit in." William looked at her, his heart full. "I knew you would get there," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've always had it in you. You just had to believe it." Isabella smiled, a smile that reached her eyes, and for the first time, she truly felt like she belonged not just in her father's world, but in the world at large. The journey wasn't over, but she was no longer afraid to walk it. Together, with her father by her side, she was ready for whatever came next. As the days turned into weeks, Isabella's progress became more evident. She had blossomed from a quiet, withdrawn girl into someone who was eager to embrace life again. Her drawings were now more than just an escape. They had become a powerful form of self-expression. Each sketch told a story, a piece of her healing process, unfolding in front of her. William watched with pride as his daughter navigated this new world. There were still moments of hesitation, times when the past seemed to rear its head, but he knew that those were just temporary setbacks. What mattered was that Isabella was no longer letting her fears dictate her life. One afternoon, while Isabella was in her room, working on a new piece of art, William received an unexpected call. It was from a school counselor, someone he had never met before but whose voice carried a sense of urgency. "Mr. Hart," the counselor said, "I wanted to talk to you about Isabella. She's made remarkable progress, but there's a situation I believe we need to address. She's starting to isolate herself again." William's heart sank. He had seen Isabella's progress, and he thought they were past the hardest part. But now, hearing the counselor's words, he realized how fragile her journey still was. "What do you mean by isolating herself?" William asked, his voice steady but filled with concern. "She's becoming more withdrawn," the counselor explained. "It's not as obvious, but she's pulling away from her classmates. I'm worried she's starting to build walls again, even though she's been so open with you." The news hit William harder than he expected. He had always known that Isabella's fears could return at any moment, but hearing that she was withdrawing again felt like a punch to the gut. "I understand," William said, trying to mask the worry in his voice. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I'll talk to her." After the call ended, William sat in his office for a moment, processing what he had just learned. Isabella had come so far, but this was a reminder that healing wasn't a straight path. There would be setbacks, and he would need to be there for her when they came. He stood up and walked to her room. As he entered, he saw Isabella sitting at her desk, surrounded by sketches. She didn't look up as he approached, and for a moment, he hesitated. "Isabella?" he said softly. She looked up at him, her eyes soft but guarded. "Hey, Dad," she said quietly. There was something in her voice that made William's heart ache. It was a mixture of exhaustion and quiet sadness, the kind he had heard before when she had been trapped in her silence. He sat down beside her, not wanting to push too hard, but needing to understand what was going on. "I got a call from the school today," he began. Isabella tensed slightly but didn't say anything. "They told me you've been a little quiet in class lately," William continued. "That you've been pulling away from your friends." Isabella shrugged, her gaze drifting to the window. "I'm fine," she said, but William could hear the uncertainty in her voice. He reached out, gently touching her arm. "Sweetheart, you don't have to hide from me. If something's bothering you, I need to know." Isabella bit her lip, and for a moment, William thought she wasn't going to speak. But then, in a soft whisper, she said, "I don't know how to be normal, Dad. I feel like I'm pretending." The words hit William hard. He had been so focused on helping her speak again, on helping her find her place in the world, but he hadn't realized how deep her insecurities still ran. "Isabella," he said softly, "you don't have to be normal. You're perfect, just as you are. You don't have to pretend for anyone." Isabella looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and doubt. "But everyone else seems so confident, so sure of who they are, and I feel like I'm still lost." William's heart broke for her. He had watched her grow stronger, but he knew now that there were still parts of her that she hadn't fully confronted. "It's okay to feel lost sometimes," William said, his voice warm and reassuring. "Everyone has doubts, even people who seem confident. The difference is, you're learning to face them, and that's something to be proud of." Isabella stayed silent for a moment, then asked, "How did you learn to be confident, Dad?" William smiled, a small chuckle escaping his lips. "I didn't always have it," he said. "In fact, I've made my fair share of mistakes, but I've learned that confidence doesn't come from pretending to be perfect. It comes from accepting who you are, flaws and all." Isabella looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "I guess I'm still learning that," she said softly. William squeezed her hand gently. "And that's okay. We all are. You don't have to rush." For the next few days, Isabella continued to struggle with her feelings of uncertainty, but something had shifted. She wasn't as withdrawn as before. She began to share more with her father, and even her classmates noticed the difference. She had started to open up again, not just to others, but to herself. She began to realize that being herself was enough. One afternoon, after a week of struggling, Isabella sat down with her sketchbook again. This time, instead of drawing just the tree, she added more to it: colorful flowers blossoming from the roots, symbolizing the growth she had experienced over the past few months. She smiled as she finished the drawing, feeling a sense of accomplishment. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. And, for the first time, she truly felt at peace with it. That evening, as Isabella showed her father the drawing, she looked up at him with a newfound sense of confidence. "I think I'm starting to understand," she said. "It's not about being perfect, it's about being me." William smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "And that's more than enough, sweetheart." As the weeks passed, Isabella continued to blossom. She was no longer the timid, withdrawn girl who had once hidden from the world. She had found her voice, both literally and figuratively, and she was learning to embrace the world around her. But William Hart knew that true healing was a continuous journey. Despite her progress, there were still moments when she doubted herself, moments when her past fears seemed to creep back in. One Saturday afternoon, as they sat together in the living room, Isabella looked out the window, her expression distant. William, who had grown used to seeing her vibrant smile and open heart, noticed the change in her demeanor. She seemed lost in thought. "Isabella," he called gently. She turned to him, but there was a flicker of sadness in her eyes. "What's wrong?" he asked, concerned. Isabella hesitated for a moment before speaking, her voice quiet. "I'm still not sure I belong, Gad," she admitted. "Sometimes I feel like everyone around me is so confident, and I'm still struggling to find my place." William's heart ached for her. He had seen her come so far, but he knew this was an obstacle she would have to face in her own time. "Isabella," he said softly, "it's okay to feel uncertain. You don't have to have everything figured out right now. The important thing is that you're trying, and that's more than enough." Isabella looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of doubt and hope. "But what if I can't ever be as confident as everyone else?" she asked. William took a deep breath. "Sweetheart, confidence isn't about being like everyone else. It's about accepting who you are, even when you feel unsure. No one has all the answers, and that's okay. You're unique, and that's what makes you special." Isabella thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I guess I need to believe that more." William smiled, reaching over to gently squeeze her hand. "You will, and I'll be here, helping you every step of the way." The following week, William noticed a shift in Isabella. She was still uncertain at times, but there was a determination in her that hadn't been there before. She had started to take more risks, small ones, but they were steps forward. She volunteered to present a project in class, something she would never have done before. Though she was nervous, she pushed through her fear and spoke confidently in front of her peers. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. That evening, when she returned home, William could see the pride in her eyes. "How did it go?" he asked, a smile playing on his lips. Isabella beamed. "I did it, Dad. I actually did it." William's heart swelled with pride. "I'm so proud of you," he said. "I knew you could do it." Isabella sat down beside him, her face glowing. "It wasn't as scary as I thought it would be," she admitted. "I still felt nervous, but I didn't let it stop me." William nodded. "That's what bravery is, Isabella. It's not about being fearless. It's about facing your fears and doing it anyway." Isabella smiled, her confidence growing with every word. "I think I'm starting to understand that," she said softly. "I'm not perfect, but that's okay." "Exactly," William said, his voice warm and full of love. "And that's what makes you amazing." Over the next few weeks, Isabella continued to step outside her comfort zone. She joined a local art class and began to open up more to her classmates. She made a few new friends, and though it was still difficult at times, she began to feel a sense of belonging. It was a slow process, but she was getting there. One afternoon, as she sat in the park sketching the trees, William sat beside her, watching her work. "You've come so far," he said, his voice full of admiration. Isabella looked up at him, her eyes soft. "I know," she said, "but I still have a long way to go, don't I?" William smiled gently. "We all do. But the important thing is that you're moving forward, and that's what matters." Isabella nodded, a sense of peace settling over her. "I think I'm finally starting to believe in myself," she said. "I'm starting to see that I don't need to be anyone else. I just need to be me." William's heart swelled with pride as he looked at his daughter. "That's all you've ever needed to be, Isabella." That evening, as Isabella went to bed, she felt a sense of calm that had eluded her for so long. She was no longer defined by her fears, no longer held back by the silence that had once consumed her. She was learning to embrace herself, flaws and all, and for the first time in years, she felt free. The journey had been long, and it wasn't over, but Isabella was no longer afraid to walk it. With her father's unwavering support and her own growing confidence, she was ready for whatever the future held. As she drifted off to sleep, she knew that she had found something far more important than just a voice. She had found the strength to be herself. It had been several months since Isabella's life had begun to change. Slowly but surely, she had started to build the life she once thought was out of reach. Her confidence had grown, and with each passing day, the walls she had built around herself began to crumble. William Hart, her father, couldn't help but be in awe of the young woman she was becoming. He had always known she was strong, but now, he saw that strength emerging in ways he had never imagined. Despite the progress, Isabella still had moments of doubt. Though she had embraced the world around her, there were times when the weight of her past would come rushing back. But with each challenge, she faced it head-on, knowing that she had the tools to overcome it. One afternoon, as she sat in the living room working on her art, William sat beside her, watching her work in silence. Isabella's focus was intense, her pencil moving across the page with purpose. He smiled softly, knowing how far she had come. "What are you working on?" he asked, his voice gentle. Isabella glanced up at him, her expression warm. "Just a sketch," she said. "Something to help me clear my mind." She handed him the sketch pad, and he studied the drawing. It was a beautiful scene of a sunrise over the mountains, the light slowly breaking through the darkness. There was something about it that captured the feeling of her journey, her rise from the shadows, finding light in the most unexpected places. "This is amazing," William said, his voice full of admiration. Isabella smiled modestly. "It's just something I did to express what I've been feeling." William nodded, understanding that art had become an outlet for her, a way to process her emotions and experiences. "It's beautiful, Isabella. You've come so far, not just with your art, but with everything." Isabella looked down at her hands, her fingers tracing the edge of the sketchbook. "Sometimes, though, I still feel like there's a part of me that I can't quite reach," she admitted, her voice soft. William's heart ached for her. He had watched her grow, but he knew the road to healing wasn't always smooth. "It's okay to feel that way," he said gently. "You've been through so much, and healing takes time. But look at everything you've accomplished. You've found your voice again. You've started to find your place in the world." Isabella nodded, but the uncertainty in her eyes was still there. "I know, but what if I'm not enough? What if I'm not meant to fit in?" William reached over, placing his hand on hers. "Sweetheart, you don't have to fit in with anyone else. You don't have to be like everyone else to be important. You're already enough, just as you are." Isabella looked up at him, her eyes filled with doubt. "But sometimes it's hard to see that," she whispered. William smiled softly, his voice steady. "I know it's hard, but I've seen you grow, Isabella. I've seen the strength inside you. You have everything you need to succeed." Isabella squeezed his hand gently. "I'm trying, Dad. I really am." William nodded, his heart swelling with pride. And that's all anyone can ask for. The next day, Isabella had another breakthrough. She had been invited to join a local art exhibition, a chance to showcase her work to the public. It was something she had never imagined would happen. And though she felt nervous, she also felt a sense of excitement. She had always kept her art to herself, hidden in the safety of her room. But now, the world was about to see it. As she stood in front of the display at the exhibition, surrounded by strangers, Isabella felt a wave of emotion wash over her. This was her moment. She had come so far, and now, she was ready to share herself with the world. People stopped to admire her work, commenting on the beauty and depth of her pieces. Isabella felt a sense of pride, a sense of validation she had never experienced before. As the evening wore on, William stood beside her, watching with a quiet pride. He knew this was more than just an art show, it was a reflection of everything Isabella had overcome. Later, as they walked home, Isabella turned to him, her eyes sparkling. "Dad," she said softly, "I never thought I could do something like this." William smiled, his voice full of emotion. "I always knew you could." Isabella paused, looking up at him. "I think I'm starting to believe it too." In the days that followed, Isabella's confidence continued to grow. She took on new challenges, pushing herself further than she had ever thought possible. But through it all, she never forgot the most important lesson, that she didn't have to be perfect to be worthy. She didn't have to fit into anyone else's expectations. She just had to be herself. One evening, as Isabella worked on another piece of art, William sat down beside her. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart," he said. "You've come so far, and I'm so grateful to be here with you on this journey." Isabella looked up at him, her smile bright. "I couldn't have done it without you, Dad." William smiled back, his heart full. "You did it because you're strong. You always have been." As the night fell, Isabella sat back, looking at her work with a sense of accomplishment. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly at peace with herself. She wasn't perfect, but she was enough. And that, she realized, was all she ever needed to be. As Isabella's journey continued, she began to realize that the challenges she had faced were not just about overcoming silence or fear. They were about learning to live authentically, without the weight of past expectations. The art exhibition had been a significant moment, and it marked the beginning of a new chapter for her. With her father's support, she had stepped into a world she once feared, and now, she was ready to take on more. One day, while William was in his study working, Isabella approached him with a piece of paper in hand. It was a letter, written in her neat handwriting, and she seemed both nervous and excited as she held it out to him. "Dad," she began, "there's something I've been thinking about. I've been offered an opportunity to join a summer art program. It's a big step, and I wanted to know what you think." William looked up from his desk, his expression softening as he saw the mixture of excitement and apprehension in his daughter's eyes. He knew how much art had become a part of her healing process, and the thought of her taking this step was both thrilling and daunting. "Tell me more," he said, putting his work aside. Isabella sat down beside him, unfolding the letter. "It's a program for young artists. They'll teach us different techniques, help us develop our skills, and we'll even have the chance to display our work in an exhibition at the end. It's something I've wanted to do for a long time, but I'm still not sure if I'm ready. What if I'm not good enough? What if I don't fit in?" William placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice warm but firm. "Isabella, you're more than ready for this. You've grown so much over the past few months. You've already proven that you can face your fears and push past them. This is just another step in your journey. And I know you'll rise to the challenge. You don't have to worry about being perfect, just take it one day at a time." Isabella looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and doubt. "But what if I fail?" she asked quietly. William smiled, his heart full of pride. "You're not failing, sweetheart. You're learning. And even if things don't go exactly as planned, that's okay. What matters is that you're trying, that you're giving it your all. That's the only way to grow." Isabella nodded slowly, her fingers tracing the edge of the letter. "I'll give it a try," she said finally. "I won't let my fears stop me." The next day, Isabella sent in her application for the art program. It felt like a small but powerful victory, a step forward in her growth. Over the next few weeks, she began preparing for the program, gathering her materials and thinking about what she wanted to accomplish. The more she thought about it, the more excited she became. She wasn't just doing this for herself, she was doing it to prove to herself that she could. When the first day of the program arrived, Isabella felt a wave of nervousness wash over her. She stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. She had come so far, but now, as she prepared to take this next step, the old fears crept in. What if she wasn't good enough? What if the other artists were better than her? What if she didn't fit in? William knocked on her door, and she turned to face him. He could see the uncertainty in her eyes, and he smiled gently. "Are you ready?" he asked. Isabella nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. "I think so," she said, her voice quiet. I don't want to mess up." William walked over to her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've got this," he said softly. "Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about expressing yourself, learning, and growing. You've already done the hardest part, taking the first step. Now, just enjoy the experience." Isabella smiled at him, feeling a sense of comfort from his words. "Thanks, Dad," she said. "I'll do my best." As they drove to the art center, Isabella's nerves began to ease. She could see the excitement in other students' faces as they arrived, carrying their supplies and eager to begin. When she walked into the studio, she was greeted by a warm, welcoming atmosphere. The instructors were kind, and the other students, though older than her, seemed open and friendly. She found a spot at one of the workstations and began unpacking her materials. The first lesson was all about drawing techniques, something Isabella had been practicing on her own for a while. As the instructors demonstrated, she felt a sense of confidence slowly building inside her. She was doing what she loved, and that was enough. Throughout the day, Isabella participated in the lessons, her hands moving more fluidly as she became immersed in her work. The other students admired her sketches, and one of the instructors even asked if she would be interested in working on a collaborative project later in the week. By the end of the day, Isabella felt exhausted but fulfilled. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she truly belonged in a space, and she couldn't wait to return the next day. As she sat in the car on the way home, she turned to her father with a big smile. "I think I made the right choice," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "I feel like I belong there, like I can do this." William smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "I knew you would," he said. "You're stronger than you know." Isabella's journey was far from over, but for the first time, she felt like she was truly on her way. She had faced her fears, taken a chance, and found a new sense of purpose. And with her father by her side, she knew that there was no limit to what she could achieve. As the weeks went by, Isabella continued to immerse herself in her art program, and each day seemed to bring new discoveries about herself. She was no longer just a girl learning to express herself through sketches. She was an artist, finding her voice not just on paper, but in the world around her. The fear that had once defined her was slowly being replaced by a quiet confidence, a belief in her ability to face whatever challenges came her way. One afternoon, as she returned home from the program, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and excitement. She had spent the day working on a project that she was particularly proud of, a portrait of her father, capturing the kindness in his eyes and the warmth of his smile. It wasn't perfect, but to Isabella, it was the most honest piece she had ever created. When she showed it to William, his face lit up with pride. "This is amazing, Isabella," he said, his voice full of emotion. "You've really captured something special." Isabella smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "It's not perfect, but it's how I see you. It's how you make me feel." William placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You're more than capable of amazing things, Isabella. You always have been. I'm so proud of you." Isabella felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. It wasn't just the praise, it was the understanding, the recognition of how far she had come. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen. But despite the progress she had made, there was still something lingering in the back of her mind, a fear of the unknown, of what lay ahead. She had taken so many steps forward, but part of her still wondered if she was ready for the next big leap. The next week, the art program held a final exhibition, where the students would showcase their work. Isabella had been both excited and nervous about it. She had never shared her art in such a public setting, and the thought of it made her feel vulnerable. She had spent countless hours perfecting her pieces, but now, she would have to stand before an audience and let them judge her work. As the night of the exhibition approached, Isabella found herself growing anxious. She had come so far, but this felt like the ultimate test. Would she be accepted? Would her work be good enough? William could see the anxiety in her eyes as she prepared for the event. He had noticed the shift in her mood over the past few days. "Isabella," he said gently, "I can tell something's on your mind. Are you okay?" She hesitated before responding. "I'm just nervous. What if they don't like my work? What if they think I'm not good enough?" William smiled warmly, his voice steady and reassuring. "Sweetheart, this exhibition isn't about being perfect. It's about sharing a piece of yourself with others. And whether they like it or not, It doesn't change the fact that your work is beautiful, because it comes from you. You've already proven how much you've grown, and that's what matters most. Isabella looked at her father, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. "Thank you, Dad," she said softly. "I think I'm ready to do this." The night of the exhibition, Isabella stood nervously in front of her pieces, her hands shaking slightly as she adjusted the frames. The room was filled with people, most of them strangers, admiring the art on display. She couldn't help but feel a little out of place among the older students, but she reminded herself that this was her moment. As the evening went on, people came up to her to ask about her work. Some praised her for her technique, others for the emotional depth in her pieces. Isabella was surprised by how open and kind the people were, and with each compliment, her confidence grew a little more. At the end of the night, she received an award for Best Emerging Artist, a recognition that took her completely by surprise. It wasn't the prize that mattered, though. What mattered was the feeling of pride and accomplishment that filled her chest. She had faced her fear, shared her work with the world, and found acceptance not just from others, but from herself. As she walked out of the exhibition with William, her heart was light. "I did it, Dad," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "I actually did it." William smiled at her, his eyes filled with pride. "I knew you could. You've always had it in you." Isabella felt a sense of peace that night, knowing that she had taken another huge step forward. She wasn't afraid of the unknown anymore. She was ready for whatever came next. Her journey wasn't over, but for the first time, she felt like she was truly in control of it. She had faced her fears, embraced her talents, and found the courage to move forward. The future no longer seemed so daunting. With her father by her side, and a newfound belief in herself, Isabella knew she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the months continued to pass, Isabella's life was unfolding in ways she never imagined. After the exhibition, she felt as though a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She had stepped into the world and had been embraced by it, not just by her father, but by others too. The validation she had received for her art had given her the confidence to explore even more of herself, and now, she was thinking about what came next. For the first time, she felt ready to dream bigger. One evening, as she sat at the kitchen table, sketching out her ideas for a new art project, William walked in. He had been watching her with quiet pride over the past few months, and he could see that there was something different in her, something that had shifted. "What's going on in that creative mind of yours?" he asked, his voice filled with curiosity. Isabella looked up from her sketchbook, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "I'm thinking about applying for an art scholarship," she said, her voice filled with determination. "It's for a program at a renowned art school. I've been looking at it for a while now, and I think it's time to take the next step. What do you think?" William stopped in his tracks, looking at her with a mixture of surprise and admiration. "Isabella, that's incredible. You've come so far in such a short time. Do you feel ready for that kind of commitment?" Isabella nodded, her expression steady. "I think so. I know it's going to be a big step, but I've always wanted to take my art further. I want to push myself to be the best I can be." William's heart swelled with pride. "You've always had the drive in you, sweetheart. If anyone can do it, it's you." Isabella smiled, feeling a rush of warmth from her father's words. But even though she felt determined, there was still a flicker of doubt. "But what if I'm not good enough? What if they reject me?" she asked, her voice quieter now. William walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Sweetheart, rejection is part of life. It doesn't define your worth. What matters is that you're putting yourself out there. You're showing the world who you are, and that's something to be proud of. You've already taken so many steps forward. This is just another step in your journey." Isabella looked at her father, his words sinking in. "You're right," she said, taking a deep breath. "I'll apply. I'm going to give it my best shot." Over the next few weeks, Isabella worked tirelessly on her application. She poured her heart into every detail, choosing her best pieces of art to include in her portfolio, writing about her journey and what art meant to her. Each time she doubted herself, she would remember her father's words about putting herself out there and embracing the process, no matter the outcome. Finally, the day came when she submitted her application. It was a mix of relief and nervous anticipation. She had done everything she could, and now she would have to wait. The waiting period was long, and at times, Isabella found herself second-guessing her decision. Was it the right time? Was she really ready? But every time those doubts crept in, she reminded herself of how far she had come. She had faced so much already, and each challenge had only made her stronger. Then, one afternoon, the letter came. Isabella stood frozen in front of the mailbox, staring at the envelope with her name on it. Her heart raced as she opened it slowly, her hands trembling. She read the letter quickly, then paused, reading it again. She had been accepted. The scholarship was hers. Her dream had become a reality. The flood of emotions hit her all at once: joy, disbelief, gratitude. She had done it. She had taken that step. And now, everything was falling into place. She ran inside to find William, her excitement bubbling over. "Dad, I got in," she exclaimed, waving the letter in front of him. William looked at her, his eyes wide with pride. "Isabella, I knew you could do it," he said, enveloping her in a hug. "This is your moment, sweetheart. You earned this." Isabella's heart swelled with happiness. She had worked so hard, and now, it was all coming to fruition. She had taken a leap of faith, and it had paid off. As she stood there with her father, feeling the weight of the achievement sink in, she realized that this was just the beginning. The scholarship was a door opening to a whole new world, one that she had always dreamed of, but never thought she could reach. She wasn't just a girl who had overcome her fears. She was an artist, a creator, someone who was now ready to make her mark on the world. That night, as she lay in bed, reflecting on everything she had accomplished, Isabella knew that her journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more moments of doubt, but she was no longer afraid. She had found her voice, her confidence, and most importantly, her passion. The future was no longer something to fear, it was something to look forward to. And with her father by her side, she knew she could take on whatever came next. The next chapter of her life was just beginning, and she was ready for it. As the days passed, Isabella's excitement about her acceptance into the art program began to feel like a dream come true. The scholarship was not just a recognition of her art, but also a testament to how far she had come in her journey. She had spent so much time learning to find her voice, and now, the world was opening up to her in ways she had never imagined. Still, as the first day of the program approached, Isabella couldn't shake the feeling of nervous anticipation. She had worked so hard to get here, and now that it was time to take the next step, a wave of doubt crept in. Was she really ready for this new chapter? Would she measure up to the other artists in the program? William noticed the change in her demeanor as the day drew closer. Though she had been outwardly confident in the weeks leading up to the program, now he saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. He knew that even though she had grown so much, the old fears still lingered deep inside. One evening, as Isabella sat in her room, staring at the art supplies she had carefully packed for the program, William knocked on her door. "Isabella?" he called softly. She looked up, offering him a small smile. "Hey, Dad," she said, trying to mask the tension she felt. William stepped inside and sat beside her. He could see the worry in her eyes. "You're nervous about tomorrow, aren't you?" he asked gently. Isabella nodded, her eyes filled with uncertainty. I don't want to mess up. What if I'm not as good as everyone else?" William placed a hand on her shoulder, offering his steady reassurance. "Sweetheart, you've already shown how strong and talented you are. This program is about learning and growing, not about being perfect. You've already done the hardest part, taking the leap." Isabella took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words sink in. She had taken the leap before, stepping out of her comfort zone, embracing the uncertainty and challenges that came with it. And she had always come out stronger on the other side. "I guess you're right," she said, her voice softer now. "I've done it before. I can do it again." William smiled, his eyes filled with pride. "Exactly. And no matter what happens, I'll be here cheering you on, every step of the way." The next morning, Isabella woke up early, a knot of nerves in her stomach. As she dressed and prepared to leave for the art school, she could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She looked at herself in the mirror, taking a deep breath. She wasn't the same person who had struggled to find her voice all those months ago. She had grown, learned, and now she was about to take another step toward becoming the person she was meant to be. When she arrived at the school, Isabella was greeted by a group of students, all eager and excited about the program. She was surprised at how friendly and welcoming everyone was. She had imagined that she would feel out of place, but instead, she felt a sense of belonging. She wasn't alone in her insecurities. Everyone was there to learn and grow together. As the days of the program went on, Isabella threw herself into her work. The instructors pushed her to refine her skills, to step out of her comfort zone, and to experiment with new techniques. At times, she struggled, questioning whether she was capable of meeting the high standards of the program. But every time she doubted herself, she remembered what her father had told her. It wasn't about being perfect, it was about learning, growing, and embracing the journey. Slowly, Isabella began to notice a shift in herself. She stopped comparing herself to the other students and focused on her own progress. She discovered that she didn't need to fit into anyone else's mold. Her unique perspective and style were enough. Her art began to reflect this newfound confidence, with each piece feeling more authentic, more like her. One evening, after a particularly challenging day of creating, Isabella sat outside, looking out at the setting sun day. The sky was painted with hues of orange and pink, and for the first time in a long while, she felt at peace. She had faced her fears, and while there was still much more to learn, she knew she was on the right path. As she sat there, reflecting on everything she had accomplished, William arrived to pick her up. He could see the calmness in her demeanor, the subtle shift in her energy. "How was today?" he asked, his voice full of warmth. Isabella turned to him, her eyes bright. "It was hard, but good," she said. "I've learned so much already, and I feel like I'm finally starting to find my own voice in my art." William smiled, his heart full of pride. "I knew you would. You've always had it in you." As they drove home, Isabella thought about the journey she had been on, how she had come from a place of silence and fear to this moment, where she was embracing her talents and stepping confidently into her future. She wasn't the same person she had been when she first started the program. She was stronger, braver, and more sure of herself. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, Isabella was excited for the challenges that lay ahead. She knew she was capable of more than she had ever dreamed, and as she sat beside her father, with the future ahead of her, she knew that no matter what happened, she would continue to grow, continue to learn, and continue to embrace who she was, unapologetically. As the months continued to pass, Isabella's life seemed to be moving forward at a pace she had never imagined. The art program she had joined had pushed her in ways she didn't know were possible, and with each day, she felt herself becoming more confident, not only in her skills as an artist but also in herself as a person. The self-doubt that once held her back was now replaced with a quiet confidence that came from knowing she had the strength to face whatever came her way. One afternoon, after a particularly intense class, Isabella sat outside the studio, sketchbook in hand, as the sun began to set. She had been reflecting on how far she had come, both in her art and in her personal growth. There were still moments of doubt, still days when the fear threatened to return, but those days were becoming less frequent. She knew that the path she was on was not going to be easy, but it was hers, and that made all the difference. William, as always, had been her rock. He had supported her every step of the way, never letting her give up on herself. As she sat there, thinking about everything she had learned, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her father. "How's everything going today? I'm so proud of you, sweetheart." A smile tugged at the corner of Isabella's mouth as she read the message. She had gotten so used to hearing him say those words, but they never lost their meaning. They reminded her of how far she had come and how much further she could go. She quickly typed back, "It's been a good day. A little challenging, but I'm learning so much. Thank you for always believing in me." She hit send, then leaned back against the wall, letting the warmth of the afternoon sun wash over her. A part of her couldn't believe how much she had changed in such a short amount of time. It felt like just yesterday she had been hiding from the world, unable to speak, unable to find her place. And now, here she was, confidently sharing her work with others, taking on challenges she never thought possible. As the evening drew near, Isabella packed up her things and headed home. When she arrived, William was waiting for her in the living room, as he always was. His face lit up when he saw her. "How was your day?" he asked, his voice filled with warmth and concern. Isabella smiled as she sat down beside him. It was good. I'm tired, but it feels like I'm making progress. There were a few moments today when I felt unsure, but I pushed through. William nodded, his eyes full of pride. That's what I love about you, Isabella. You don't let fear stop you. You keep going, even when it feels difficult. Isabella looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. I don't think I could do it without you, Dad. You've always been there for me, even when I didn't believe in myself. William reached out, gently taking her hand in his. You've always had it in you, sweetheart. I just gave you a little push when you needed it. You've done all the hard work yourself. Isabella smiled, her eyes filled with emotion. I've learned so much from you, she said softly. Not just about art, but about life. About how to be strong, how to believe in myself. You've taught me that it's okay to fail, as long as I keep trying. William's heart swelled with pride. You've always been strong, Isabella. You just needed to see it for yourself. And now, you're doing incredible things. Isabella squeezed his hand. I'm excited for what's next, Dad. There's so much I want to learn, so many things I still want to do. William smiled, his voice full of encouragement. Whatever you want to do, sweetheart, I'll be here to support you. You've already proven that you can do anything you set your mind to. The next few weeks passed quickly, and Isabella's growth continued at a steady pace. She took on new challenges in the art program, experimenting with different techniques and finding new ways to express herself. The more she learned, the more confident she became. Her artwork started to reflect her own journey, bold, vibrant, and full of emotion. It was clear to everyone around her that Isabella was no longer the shy, withdrawn girl she had once been. She was an artist in every sense of the word, and she was ready to take on the world. One day, Isabella received an invitation to participate in a national art competition. The prize was a scholarship to a prestigious art school, something she had only dreamed of. The thought of entering the competition filled her with excitement, but also with a sense of fear. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she failed? She showed the invitation to William, who was immediately filled with pride for her. This is your chance, sweetheart, he said, his voice filled with encouragement. You've worked so hard to get here. This competition could be the next big step for you. Isabella looked at the invitation, her fingers trembling slightly. I don't know, she said softly. What if I'm not ready for something like this? William placed a hand on her shoulder. Isabella, you're more than ready. You've already come so far, and I know you can do this. Even if you don't win, just entering the competition will show you how far you've come. Isabella took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. She had come so far. She had faced her fears, overcome her doubts, and proven to herself that she was capable of achieving great things. And now, it was time to take another step. I'm going to do it, Dad, she said, her voice filled with determination. I'm going to enter the competition. William smiled, his eyes filled with pride. I knew you would. As Isabella prepared for the competition, she poured her heart into her work. She didn't focus on the outcome or the prize. She focused on creating something that was true to herself, something that reflected the artist she had become. When the time came to submit her entry, she felt a sense of peace. No matter what happened, she had already accomplished so much. The journey was never about winning. It was about learning, growing, and embracing who she was. And with that realization, Isabella knew that the future was brighter than she had ever imagined. As the weeks passed after Isabella entered the competition, her life seemed to accelerate into new and unexpected directions. The competition was looming, and while Isabella had focused on creating her best work, she couldn't shake the anticipation and anxiety that had been growing in her heart. It wasn't about the prize anymore. It was about proving to herself that she could step into this new chapter and take on whatever challenges came with it. There was a new confidence in her, something that she had earned through the hardships she had faced and the progress she had made. But deep inside, there was still a flicker of doubt, a fear that despite all her growth, maybe she wasn't good enough. As the day of the competition drew closer, William noticed the change in Isabella. She was still working diligently on her art, but there was a quiet tension in the way she carried herself. He knew his daughter well enough to recognize when she was struggling with self-doubt. One evening, after she had spent hours working on her final piece for the competition, William sat down beside her. He could see the exhaustion in her eyes, but more than that, he saw the uncertainty. "Isabella," he said gently, his voice full of care, "you've been working so hard, but you seem worried. What's going on?" Isabella paused, her fingers lingering on the edge of her sketchbook as she glanced up at him. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted quietly. "I've worked so hard, but what if it's not enough? What if I'm not good enough for the competition?" William's heart ached as he listened to her. He had seen his daughter overcome so many obstacles, yet this fear still lingered, a shadow that seemed to follow her even through her brightest moments. "Sweetheart," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I've watched you grow in ways that most people could only dream of. You've faced fears that would have kept others stuck, but you've moved past them. This competition, this art, it's all just one step in your journey, and whether you win or not, you've already proven to yourself how strong you are. That's what matters most." Isabella looked down at her hands, her expression mixed with vulnerability and a growing sense of realization. "But what if I don't win? What if all my work doesn't mean anything?" she asked softly. William placed a hand on her shoulder, leaning in slightly. "Isabella, winning isn't the measure of your worth. You've shown more strength, more courage, than most people ever will. And that's something that can't be measured by a competition. Your work already means something. It's a reflection of everything you've been through, everything you've learned. It's about who you are, not just what you do." Isabella smiled faintly, the weight in her chest easing just a little. "Thanks, Dad," she said quietly. "I'm not sure I believe it yet, but I'll try." William smiled back at her, his heart full of pride. "That's all I ask. Just keep trying." The days leading up to the competition were filled with a mix of excitement and nerves. Isabella spent every free moment perfecting her piece, making sure that it was exactly what she wanted to present to the judges. The support from her father, combined with her own drive to succeed, had helped push her past the doubts that had been holding her back. When the day of the competition arrived, Isabella felt a familiar nervous energy in her stomach. But this time, it was different. Instead of feeling paralyzed by fear, she felt an undercurrent of excitement. She had come this far. She had faced her fears, embraced her challenges, and now, she was ready to share her work with the world. As she arrived at the competition venue, Isabella took a deep breath. She could feel the presence of other artists, their own excitement and nerves swirling around her. The room was filled with pieces of art that were all unique, all beautiful in their own way. For a moment, Isabella felt small, like she didn't belong among the other talented artists. But then she remembered her father's words, and a quiet strength began to build within her. She wasn't here to compare herself to anyone else. She was here to show the world who she was, to express her story through her art. As she set up her piece, Isabella noticed the judges making their rounds, observing each piece with critical eyes. She felt a brief flutter of anxiety, but she reminded herself that this was just part of the process. She wasn't just here to win, she was here to share a piece of herself, to take this step forward in her journey. When the time came for her to present her work to the judges, Isabella took a deep breath and walked forward with quiet confidence. She explained the inspiration behind her piece, her journey of self-discovery, and how her art had been a reflection of her growth. She spoke clearly, her voice steady, and as she looked up, she saw the judges nodding, their expressions thoughtful. It wasn't about impressing them. It was about being true to herself. When the presentation was over, Isabella returned to her space, feeling a quiet peace. She had done it. She had faced her fears, shared her art, and embraced the vulnerability that came with putting herself out into the world. As the day went on, the anxiety she had felt began to melt away. Whether she won or not, she had already achieved something far greater. She had faced her fears and given her best. The competition ended, and the judges began announcing the winners. When they called her name for a special recognition, Isabella's heart leapt. She had won a place in the art program she had dreamed of for so long. She had done it. As she accepted the award, Isabella's heart swelled with pride. The road ahead was still long, but with each step, she was growing into the person she was meant to be. And with her father by her side, she knew that no matter where this journey took her, she was capable of anything. After Isabella's victory in the competition, she felt like she had finally stepped into a new chapter of her life. The award was more than just a recognition of her artistic talent, it was a confirmation that she had the strength to continue pushing forward, no matter the challenges. Her father, William, had always been her rock, her constant source of support, but now, Isabella was beginning to believe in herself in ways she never had before. She had proven to herself that she was capable of achieving her dreams, and with the scholarship she had won, she was one step closer to the future she had always imagined. As the days passed, Isabella threw herself into the next phase of her artistic journey. She continued her work with renewed purpose, her confidence growing with each brushstroke, each sketch, each project she completed. She knew that there would be more obstacles ahead, more moments of doubt, but she also knew that she could face them with the same strength she had shown in the competition. One evening, as she worked late into the night on a new project, her mind wandered back to her earlier days, the days when she had been paralyzed by silence, when the world had felt too overwhelming to navigate. Those days seemed so far away now, almost like a lifetime ago. She had come so far, but there was still so much she wanted to accomplish. As she sat back to admire her work, the familiar feeling of uncertainty crept in again. What if she wasn't truly ready for this next step? What if the pressure of living up to expectations became too much? Just as those thoughts began to overwhelm her, her phone buzzed. It was a message from William. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. Keep going, no matter what." Isabella smiled as she read the message. She had come to rely on her father's words of encouragement, but she also realized that she no longer needed them to validate her. She knew deep down that she was on the right path, even if the road ahead was still uncertain. The next day, Isabella received another letter this time. It was from the prestigious art school she had applied to. The letter was an invitation to attend an intensive summer program designed for emerging artists. It was a chance to refine her skills, gain exposure, and learn from some of the best instructors in the field. As she read the letter, Isabella's heart skipped a beat. This was it, this was the opportunity she had been waiting for, the chance to take her art to the next level. She quickly picked up the phone and called William. "Dad, I got in," she exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement. William's voice crackled with emotion on the other end of the line. "Isabella, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you," he said, his pride evident in every word. Isabella could feel the warmth of his support through the phone, and it filled her with a deep sense of peace. "I can't believe it," she said, her voice shaking with excitement. "This is everything I've dreamed of. I'm really doing it, Dad. I'm really pursuing this." William's voice softened. "You've worked so hard for this, Isabella. You've earned it, and I know you're going to make the most of every opportunity." Isabella felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She knew that she wasn't where she was just because of luck. She had worked tirelessly to get here. She had faced her fears, embraced the unknown, and kept moving forward, even when things seemed impossible. The journey had been long, and at times, it had been incredibly difficult. But now, as she looked ahead, she knew that she was ready for whatever came next. The summer program was just the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter filled with endless possibilities. As the days passed, Isabella prepared for the summer program with a sense of excitement and purpose. She spent hours perfecting her portfolio, gathering materials, and mentally preparing for the challenges that awaited her. It wasn't going to be easy, but she knew she was more than capable of rising to the occasion. When the first day of the program arrived, Isabella was filled with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. As she walked through the doors of the art school, she felt a wave of apprehension. This was a whole new level of competition artists who had been honing their craft for years, people whose talents were beyond her wildest dreams. For a moment, she felt small, like an imposter among giants. But then, she remembered something her father had told her. "You don't have to be perfect, sweetheart. You just have to be yourself." With that in mind, Isabella walked into the program, determined to make the most of this opportunity, to push herself beyond her limits and learn as much as she could. Over the next few weeks, Isabella immersed herself in the program. She worked tirelessly, experimenting with new techniques, exploring different styles, and pushing her boundaries as an artist. The instructors recognized her potential, offering valuable feedback and guidance that helped her refine her skills. But more than that, Isabella began to realize that she wasn't just learning about art, she was learning about herself. She was discovering her own voice, finding confidence in her unique perspective, and gaining the strength to express herself in ways she had never imagined. The more she worked, the more she realized that art was not just about technique, it was about connection. It was about telling a story, about sharing a piece of her soul with the world. As the program came to a close, Isabella looked back on everything she had accomplished. She had come so far from the girl who had been afraid to speak, afraid to express herself. Now, she was an artist, a creator, someone who was ready to take on the world. And with her father by her side, she knew there was nothing she couldn't achieve. As Isabella settled into the rhythm of the summer program, she found herself facing a new set of challenges. The program was intense, the instructors demanding, and the expectations were high. Every day was filled with long hours of hard work, intense focus, and constant self-reflection. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, Isabella felt a sense of purpose. She was doing exactly what she had always dreamed of, pushing herself as an artist, developing her skills, and discovering her own voice. At times, the pressure felt unbearable. There were days when she doubted herself, questioning whether she was truly ready for this level of competition. Would her art stand out among the talented artists around her? Was she capable of making it to the next level? These doubts often crept into her mind, especially late at night when she sat alone in her room, reviewing her work and wondering if it was good enough. But each time, she would remember what her father had always told her. You don't have to be perfect, just be yourself. Those words had become her anchor, grounding her when the weight of self-doubt became too much to bear. Isabella had come so far from the timid girl, who had once been paralyzed by fear. Now, she was starting to embrace the idea that her uniqueness was her greatest strength. She wasn't trying to copy anyone else. She was creating from her heart, telling her own story through her art. It wasn't about impressing others, it was about expressing herself. One evening, after a particularly challenging class, Isabella sat in the courtyard of the art school, watching the sunset. The colors in the sky reminded her of the work she had been doing, the mix of light and dark, the way her emotions bled into every stroke of paint. She had been experimenting with abstract art, using color and texture to convey feelings she couldn't quite put into words. The pieces were raw, sometimes chaotic, but each one felt like a true reflection of her inner world. As she sat there, lost in thought, one of the instructors, a woman named Miss Harrington, walked by. Miss Harrington had been a mentor to Isabella throughout the program, offering both praise and constructive criticism with equal care. You're deep in thought, Isabella, she remarked, sitting down beside her. What's on your mind? Isabella hesitated for a moment before speaking. I'm just thinking about my work, she said. It's so different from what I expected when I started this program. I used to focus on making things look perfect, but now I'm trying to capture something real, something raw. But sometimes, I wonder if it's too much. What if it's not good enough? Miss Harrington smiled warmly, her eyes kind. Isabella, art is never about perfection. It's about vulnerability, about letting your emotions show through your work. The fact that you're exploring new ways of expressing yourself, that's what makes your art so powerful. Don't be afraid to dig deep and show what's inside of you. The world needs more artists who are willing to be honest in their work. Isabella looked at her, her heart swelling with gratitude. Thank you, she said softly. I just needed to hear that. Miss Harrington patted her on the back. Keep pushing yourself, Isabella. You're doing great. Over the next few weeks, Isabella immersed herself in her art even more deeply. She embraced the freedom that came with creating without the pressure of trying to meet anyone's expectations. Each brushstroke felt like a release, a letting go of the fears and insecurities that had held her back for so long. She was no longer afraid to make mistakes. In fact, she welcomed them, knowing that they were part of the process. As the program neared its end, Isabella felt a sense of accomplishment she had never known before. She had learned so much, not just about art, but about herself. The doubts that had once consumed her had been replaced by a quiet confidence. She had come to understand that her journey was not about reaching a destination, it was about embracing every step, every mistake, and every success along the way. One evening, as the program was wrapping up, the instructors held a final review of each student's work. Isabella stood nervously beside her pieces, her heart pounding. She had come so far, but the thought of presenting her work one last time filled her with anxiety. When her turn came, she took a deep breath and walked up to the front of the room. As she stood before the group, she explained the meaning behind her pieces, how each one reflected a different aspect of her emotional journey. She spoke with clarity and passion, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. As she finished her presentation, she looked up at the instructors and fellow students, waiting for their feedback. There was a moment of silence before Miss Harrington spoke. "Isabella, your work is powerful. It's raw, it's emotional, and it's honest. You've taken risks, and that's what makes your art stand out. I have no doubt that you have a future in this field if you continue to push yourself." Isabella felt a wave of relief wash over her. The validation wasn't what mattered most, it was the fact that she had trusted herself and her process. She had opened herself up to vulnerability, and in doing so, she had found a new level of strength. As the program came to a close, Isabella reflected on everything she had accomplished. She had proven to herself that she was capable of far more than she had ever imagined. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid of the unknown. She had the confidence to face whatever challenges came her way. And as she stood beside her father, ready to take the next step in her artistic journey, Isabella knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. As the final days of Isabella's summer program approached, she stood in front of her canvas, paintbrush in hand, a sense of accomplishment filling her chest. She had come a long way, but the journey wasn't over yet. She had learned more than just artistic techniques. She had learned about herself, about her strength, her vulnerability, and her ability to face challenges with courage and resilience. Every brushstroke, every line, had been a step in her transformation, and now, as the program came to an end, she felt ready to take on whatever came next. The final exhibition was the culmination of all their hard work, a moment for the students to showcase everything they had learned and created. Isabella stood in front of her pieces, nervously adjusting the frames, making sure everything was perfect. Her heart raced, but instead of the familiar fear that used to paralyze her, there was a quiet excitement. She had made it to this point. No matter what happened tonight, she was proud of the work she had done. As the exhibition opened to the public, Isabella's parents arrived. Her father, William, with a wide smile on his face, his eyes filled with pride. Isabella hadn't realized how much she had missed seeing him in person until he walked through the door. And now, with him by her side, she felt an overwhelming sense of support. "This is it, Dad," she said, her voice a mixture of excitement and nerves. "I've worked so hard for this moment." William placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice steady and filled with warmth. "You've done more than just work hard, sweetheart," he said. "You've grown, you've learned, and you've shown the world who you are. That's what matters most." Isabella smiled at him, feeling the weight of his words. She wasn't just showcasing her art tonight, she was showcasing herself. Her journey, her struggles, her victories, all of it was reflected in the pieces hanging on the walls. As the evening went on, people came and went, admiring the artwork, offering compliments, and engaging in conversations with the students. Isabella felt a sense of pride with every word of encouragement she received. But more than that, she felt a sense of peace. She had faced her fears, stepped into the world, and shared her story. And that, more than any award or recognition, was the greatest achievement. Toward the end of the night, Miss Harrington, one of the instructors who had mentored Isabella throughout the program, approached her with a smile. "Isabella, your work tonight is incredible," she said. "You've truly come into your own as an artist. I can see the depth, the emotion in your pieces. You've shown great courage in putting yourself out there, and I believe you have a bright future ahead of you." Isabella's heart swelled with gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her voice sincere. "This program has meant more to me than I can express. It's not just about art, it's about learning to believe in myself." Miss Harrington nodded, a knowing look in her eyes. "And that's the real work. The art comes from within, but the confidence to share it with the world is something you've earned. Keep going, Isabella. The world needs to see more of your voice." That night, as Isabella walked home with William, she felt a sense of calm she hadn't known before. The anxiety and self-doubt that had once ruled her life seemed like a distant memory. She had faced them, challenged them, and emerged stronger on the other side. The road ahead was still uncertain, there would be more obstacles, more self-doubt, but now, she knew she had the tools to navigate them. "Dad," Isabella said as they walked side by side, the cool night air filling their lungs. I feel like I've come a long way, but there's still so much more I want to do. I want to keep pushing myself. I'm ready for the next step. William smiled, his pride evident in every word. And you'll keep pushing, sweetheart. I have no doubt about that. You've already proven that you're capable of more than you thought. Isabella stopped walking for a moment and looked up at her father. Thank you, Dad. For everything. I wouldn't be here without you. William looked down at her, his eyes soft. You've always had it in you, Isabella. I just helped you see it. As they continued their walk home, Isabella knew that this was just the beginning. The summer program had been a chapter in her story, but it was not the end. There were more lessons to learn, more art to create, and more dreams to chase. She had come so far, but she knew the journey was far from over. The future was no longer something to fear. It was something to look forward to. With her father by her side, supporting her every step of the way, she felt ready to take on whatever came next. She was no longer afraid of failure, because she had learned that failure wasn't the end, it was part of the process. And with each step she took, she was getting closer to the person she was meant to be. Isabella had found her voice, her confidence, and her passion, and that was just the beginning of what was to come.